Hello everyone, welcome to your world of mine. Show me yours and I'll show you mine. And today we have beautiful Maria. She's also an alien, by the way. And you all know I'm an alien. I'm visiting Earth to see what this world's all about and what's happening here. So Marie, when I say you're an alien, everybody, I'm just joking. She's living in Vancouver, but she hails from another country and she can tell us herself where that's from. And now she actually got to Vancouver through all the years and what she finds fascinating about that. So Marie, what brought you to Vancouver, or to Canada for that matter?
So I grew up in Namibia, or as the President of the United States now calls it, was it Namibia or something? Which is really great. Suddenly Namibia is on the map again. And I moved to, so I was born in Cape Town actually, and then my family were all from Namibia, and so I grew up there. And when I became a chartered accountant with Deloitte, I moved to South Africa. There was just Namibia at that stage did not have such an open mind towards women who work and have roles like that. And so in South Africa, I think I was there for about 15 years, and Manny and I got married, and we started sort of looking towards the future. And he always had this dream of traveling and being overseas, and I haven't traveled too much. Interestingly enough, I worked too much and worked too hard in my career. And so we looked around the world and said, where is a place where we can feel it's relatively a good economy, it's got a lot of, it's safe, and it's in a place where you can travel sort of everywhere in the world. And we landed on Canada, and everyone said, oh, that's a bit unusual. But, you know, we came here in winter time, which is, I think, a good time to come and check it all out. Landed in Toronto, and first time I saw snow and everything, so it was hilarious. We went to Banff in Alberta, and I had to snow for the first time, and that was quite an experience. I went down the mountain screaming. So it didn't turn out to be one of my great talents. Manny is an absolute natural. And while we were in Toronto, you know, we started really looking at the West Coast in Canada, and we flew to Vancouver for a visit, and I just fell in love with the mountains. It's very much like Cape Town. Beautiful mountains. People here are really healthy. I think the life expectancy is like 4 or 5 years more than anywhere else in Canada. And so I've been here now for about 5, 6 years. Still, I'm going to start traveling a lot, but it's a great place to travel. And the thing about Vancouver that's really amazing for people is we are sort of a gateway towards Asia as well. And so it's amazing when you go downtown and you just meet so many different people, you know, people from South Korea, from Japan, you know, and I've got friends, you know, just from all over the world. So it's just a wonderful experience.
I remember when I was in Vancouver a few years ago as well. I've never seen in any country in the world, I've traveled a lot myself, ever saw so many people exercising outside, even in the cold weather.
Oh yeah, that is so true. I arrived here, you feel very, very bad if you're not doing exercise. Yeah, Lululemon, which is one of the most well-known brands, started here in South Africa. It's they make all these fantastic yoga clothes, and they actually changed the whole culture globally. Where you have this fashion action wear now. So here it's very normal for you to wear, you know, yoga pants and really go out and sit in a restaurant and no one will even blink, you know, but it's all really, really smart. A new trend actually, which I predicted that will happen, and that is that people are starting to wear, they're starting to make clothes now that is actually made for movement while you go to work. So I hope in the next few years we're all going to get rid of all these suits and ties and things and just dress in a way that we can move our bodies, because all the sitting, that is just not really good for anyone.
Oh yeah, I resonate with that. Taking away all these business suits and that culture, it's a different culture. And just coming back to the being and being who you are in whatever you feel comfortable in going to work. I remember when I was in Turkey, I had a very interesting experience the first time. I did personal sessions with people as well as workshops in business world. were CEO level people. And I remember my friend that I worked with at the time there, she had an HR company. She was horrified when she was seeing what I was wearing towards facilitating these workshops. And I just looked at her and said, she wanted to take me shopping. I said, no way, this is me. I do this anywhere in the world, whether it's in Japan or there, it doesn't matter. And it was so funny that actually the CEOs, some of them, the men, afterwards called me, come here, we love what you're wearing. See? So it's just when you, whatever is natural to us, we can be ourselves. But I'm also interested in, when you speak about Vancouver, about the community there. In my experience, there's a lot of people that they call it the integral community. Did you have any engagement, or are you part of it? Or what is that? Because other people, when I share that with other people in the world, some of them, depends on where they are, they don't really understand what that means.
Well, it's interesting that you ask. I'm actually running a podcast called The Blockchain Executive, and one of the people that I interviewed, and her interview will go out. I'll let you know once it happens. She's actually been involved in integral coaching for years. She's now, I call her like a Buddhist, Zen Buddhist nun. Rochelle Fairfield, an amazing person. And so she trained under people who worked with Ken Wilber, and it's really just around bringing all the aspects, not only of yourself but the world around you, into being, and not being having this approach of siloing yourself. When you talk to her, it's amazing. I mean, it's like a meditation when you talk to her. She's just so clear in the way she speaks and articulates very interesting ideas, and she's like mindful as she's speaking. And I just the reason I interviewed is I just thought, oh my gosh, just talking to her, it's just so energizing and lovely. So yeah, very interesting people that you meet in Vancouver. And then Vancouver also was one of the, and it still is, has a very interesting community in the crypto world. The first Bitcoin ATM in the world was established here, and Manny and I were advisors for that team. So we really were there right when it was sort of underground, and that underground space is still here in Vancouver. So this year, a group of people had what is called DogeCon. It was a very big art absurdist festival, is what they call it. That was arranged for 4 days, and it was sort of a global phenomenon. So yes, we're a very small city, but interesting things come from here because people here are a bit more creative. It's a very different type of environment, and we're known for being more peaceful, and lots of activists are from here. The street that I'm living in now, just up the road, is a little coffee shop, and that's where Greenpeace was born many years ago. So yeah, it's an interesting place with an interesting history as well.
Yeah, and I also have a little bit of a tidbit there. When I was in Vancouver, one of my dear friends there, which I met in the US a few years ago, her son was one of the founding partners of Twitter.
Oh my goodness, yes, of course. And then Hootsuite is here from here as well, Hootsuite.
Yeah, I know Hootsuite, yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, even in the crypto space, we have some of the top companies started here in Vancouver. And Manny and I did a report that was sponsored by the government here in BC. And we actually went around and looked at all the companies that are starting off in the environment here. This is the one thing that still everyone talks about. So a lot of people actually come to Vancouver to open up their businesses now, because they can have really good developers and creative developers as well, because we have a community that's truly cosmopolitan and very open. It's people really about diversity here. The quality of work that you get is actually interesting, and it's interesting for me when I watch movies nowadays. Like I think it was a few of these sort of sci-fi movies in particular, I can actually see how it was all filmed in BC and Stanley Park. It's actually quite amazing how much the world knows about BC and in particular Vancouver through movies. They wouldn't know it if they don't live here, but you definitely travel through this space in sci-fi movies.
Well, you mentioned something very interesting. I'm just connecting all some of the dots that you're sharing now about a space like Vancouver, to live there. and because it's very creative, like you say, and it's open, and there's this integral sort of thread that's running through as well, and that piece, but also connected to the physical movement, the exercising.
Oh yeah,
So it's all connected. It's all
yeah,
makes, it even makes sense to me if I'm just thinking about
yeah.
it. That
But
type of culture will be very prolific.
however, so this is the other part of it as well. It is a very aspirational, expensive city too, and so we have a lot of people with a lot of wealth in the city, and so there is also that aspect of people coming here and they just go shopping. When you go downtown, it's just Gucci, and folks literally fly in from Hong Kong, get whisked off in these huge cars, and lots of Lamborghinis and things, and so people do like to display their money and enjoy their money here as well, and not everyone in Vancouver have access to that. So like any of the big cities, there is this challenge happening now that the cities are becoming more and more difficult for ordinary folks to access, if you're a hairdresser or you work in retail. So this is also a challenge. So, if you've got a lot of money, then you're living in heaven, you can have all these wonderful views. But if you're sort of a person who's a hairdresser, you might have to move out, or, you travel a bit further to get into town. So there is that part that everyone is busy working on and trying to figure out how to not have these huge challenges that a lot of cities are globally are experiencing now. And because we've got some of the best weather in Canada, which is another reason we got here as well. Obviously, it's better for people to come here if they're struggling to get accommodation. Because at least they can survive a bit winter. And we have an attitude towards people who don't have, are homeless, that is a lot more forgiving, a lot more compassionate. So, it's easier for people to come here and find help.
So you bring up something about humaneness, when you speak about the compassion part and the allowing part for those type of people to also be integrated into the community in some way.
Yeah. And then also a lot of people, when they see folks here, think that we are very peaceful, but, we have a very strong activist community. I think the amount of registered non-for-profits is the largest in our province in British Columbia. So as peaceful as people look like here, there's no problem with them going and tying themselves up to a tree so that people don't cut down a forest or put down pipelines. So we have a very vibrant political environment around protecting the environment. And once you get on a ferry, I don't know if you remember from being here, if you managed to travel on the ferries to any of the islands, it's just absolutely beautiful. I mean, you just cannot describe to people when you get on there and you're in the mountains, and it's just like there's nothing, there's no modern things, you quickly get into nature, and people really love it here. In fact, there's a business here that I don't know if you've encountered them, called Mountain Equipment Co-op, or MEC, started years and years ago by South Africans who came here and they said, wow, this is amazing. We love camping and we love climbing mountains, so adventure climbing, not like me, a gentle hike up a mountain. And so they actually started importing equipment from the United States to make it affordable, and they sort of clubbed together with friends, and that became a co-op, and it's now one of the top brands in Canada in terms of adventure wear and equipment. They even do yoga nowadays, yoga outfits. So here, to do yoga is like it's so funny for me. I came to a yoga class here, and I was used in South Africa. I trained with a hatha teacher who's like actually trained in India, and then you walk in a class here and it's super competitive. It's like a whole people use it to get fit, and they go cycling, so they'll do an hour yoga workout in the morning, and then they'll be on the bicycle and cycle down to San Francisco. That's like very important for them.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to take the train from Vancouver down to Seattle. It was just amazing. It was extraordinary. It's a short trip, but it's just amazing. It's the most to drive, to be in the coach next to the ocean. It's just wonderful. But you mentioned money now a few times. And I'm really curious about You're speaking about blockchain, you're speaking about Bitcoin. Can you tell us more about that for the folks who's not really on part of what's happening in that type of world? And what is it? What is the beauty of it?
Well, so first of all, Bitcoin, there's a report that Manny showed me yesterday, and South Africans are actually trading almost as much as Canadians in Bitcoin. So there's a thriving community in South Africa, which we're very happy about. Manny actually went to South Africa a while ago when this whole thing still started and introduced and spoke about it. So we are so happy that South Africans are empowering themselves financially. I think the attraction for me in particular around these new technologies is that we are, and could be a long conversation, but it's, when people, when you understand money and how money is created, and there's a great article that I posted it on my Twitter as well, written by Daniel Wall about where does money come from. The whole way that banking work nowadays, and I'm not against banks, by the way. I worked in the banking industry for many, many years in South Africa. But, banks, money is created when banks sort of lend out, what are deposits, and sort of they're almost like created out of thin air. It's just a digital ledger. And so that, because we don't have sort of a global view of all the money that's in circulation, it created these bubbles. So we saw the one, in 2008. But for many, many years, people have said, how can we find a way that we can transact with each other in a way that is safe and secure, and that we don't always need a bank. And maybe if you sort of live in a place like Canada, you don't really have this challenge, banks work, or if you've got a, good banking system in South Africa, maybe that works. But if you live in a country where, like Argentina, where there's suddenly like a lot of inflation, banks often lock people's money away, and, all these things happen. So what happened is, out of all of this, for years and years, people said they want to create this electronic system because we've got the internet, but we still can't trade on the internet. It's very easy for me to say, hey, we sell each other something online, and I pay you, but you sell that same thing to 5 different people and I never get my money. So it makes commerce quite tricky on the internet, and it makes it difficult for me to trust you when you're in Peru or wherever, to actually, did you get the money, and are we able to trade with each other? And so what these technologies do is they just use cryptographically secure algorithms, so just mathematics. And for me, like, the best way to describe it, it's like a big machine. It's machine learning. And there's just constantly these different types of calculations on different types of networks that all work differently to make sure that we can transact with each other securely. And then the reward for this work, the system has it built into itself, so it's an incentive to create these coins or values, which is, in the case of Bitcoin, a Bitcoin. And so that Bitcoin you can then use to trade. So it's like a self-sustaining system, which is quite fascinating to actually go in. There's a really good book called, I think it's Bitcoin Gold, or Digital Gold, and it describes the whole history. So if anyone really wants to understand it, I recommend it. It was well written. It has all the figures in. Manny has personally met some of the folks as he traveled and started getting involved in it. But really fascinating, and we believe that what is happening is these technologies enable us to really have a digital asset value exchange with each other again. And obviously that creates a lot of questions. You will hear very extreme views in this world. Decentralize everything, and we don't want the governments involved, and you stay out of our lives. Everyone must fend for themselves. And then you get other people on the other spectrum and say, oh, this is great. We can help people, who are homeless, or we can help people to safeguard themselves when there's like a big run on money. One of the first universities that actually offered a program on this is University Nicosia, and you can understand why, because in Greece, when they had that big challenge with austerity, a lot of people could not access the money. I don't know if you recall that. And so for people in Greece, they directly felt what it is like when suddenly you don't have access to money. So they're quite passionate about these new technologies.
Even in South Africa, there was a bank in the 1990s, and 21 something, I can't even remember the name. The same thing happened. We couldn't access our money. I had a small account there as a savings account. And I luckily withdrew all my money without
Oh
knowing what
wow.
was going on, literally 2 weeks before the whole thing
Oh my
collapsed.
goodness,
But
that's
I know
amazing.
about a lot of my colleagues when I was still a Deloitte's consultant, who also had like a separate little account there, who lost their money. They couldn't access it. It was locked down.
Yeah.
So understand that feeling, that chaotic feelings like people's pension funds as well, those type of things, when those things collapse, the absolute distraught that happens when those type of
Yeah.
things happen in the world.
What is really great for us is, I mean, if we just think about traveling at the moment, I don't know about you, but I get incredibly frustrated when I need to use my credit card, apart from the fees that I'm, when I travel
Mm.
globally. There could be some funny amount, or you just in a shop and suddenly now you have to make a phone. Like, there's so many challenges. The opposite opportunity, like if your credit card gets lost, there's insurance, although they don't always sort that out. So I think there are lots of challenges in the whole way that we bank and how we use
Mm.
money that these technologies are addressing. And it's really early days right now. So, I always say to people, you just understand this is just the start. But a lot of people are building really interesting solutions on top of it. And I think in South Africa in particular, I saw the rand is still did another dive again, and there's so much uncertainty. And I think it's that economic uncertainty always for people. It's a really good idea, and that's why Hannelie was so passionate about going back to South Africa and speaking about it and creating awareness many years ago around the opportunity and getting involved in understanding it. And even if what I love about the space is that you can be 10 years old and you can be 70 years old and you can get involved. You can learn, you can teach about it, you can help explain it to people. If you've got the equipment, you can mine and you can learn to code. So it's just creating a whole new digital intelligence for people so that you can work remotely, so that you have access to global markets, and you are more able to be what we call a sovereign person, is what we talk about a lot. I have this philosophy, and I've had it for years. It's, we can wait for someone to come and rescue us, or we can just sit down and say, what, I have to take care of myself, I have to take care of my family, and how do I do it in the best way? And obviously in a way that can help other people as well. But years and years ago, I was lucky to meet with Akong Rinpoche. He was from the Kaju Buddhist group in South Africa, and he came through. He doesn't live anymore. He's not alive anymore. He passed away tragically in China while he was doing his work. But he said something really interesting. People would say to him, "Oh, what can I do to become enlightened? What can all these big questions?" And he was a very simple guy, and he said, the first thing you need to do is to be able to take care of yourself. Before you want to rush out and do anything for anyone else, learn to take care of yourself first. And so these technologies and these new mindsets, I think, is coming, that we can take care of ourselves and we can create a new form of society. And I'm involved because I just feel like I'd rather be involved and help shape it somehow. And maybe my little bit is just like a little drop in the ocean. But if all of us make little drops in the ocean, we can help shape the future. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting in this bus, and it's going down. I don't know if you've been to Peru, any of these countries, you're going down these mountains with this driver, and you're not sure that the wheels are working, and you're hanging on for dear life, but you have no choice. And I hate that feeling. So I'm saying, until my last moment, I want to feel I have some sort of control, or some sort of way that I can help shape the future. Even if I'm not going to be on the planet, I'm passionate about nature, I'm passionate about animals, and I'm passionate about the young generations that are being born. And how do we create a place that, if we all leave, that we can say, it's a renaissance. We actually shifted how we look at nature. We saw nature as being alive. We started looking again at animals and other living beings as our brothers and sisters. Just really go back and looking at the world from that sense of awe and wonder and magic and imagination, which unfortunately we lost. You know, and when we're children, we have it. You know, I remember my nephew used to walk around and say, "Oh, you know, Auntie, there's a fairy speaking to me," and then he had a fairy that spoke to him for a year, and I was like, "Where's your fairy today?" You know, we lose all of that. So I'm hoping that with this we will stimulate imagination and have this more personal relationship with our environment. And you know, it's interesting when I look again when they talk about the quantum world and consciousness, and the world is conscious around us, and I'm thinking, wow, it's such a wonderful thing if we can just all have enough time to just start talking to our quantum fields and consciousness around us, and get that response back. That's a wonderful opportunity.
Now, you're speaking about so many interesting things now, especially this last part, which I want to go back, but I want to go back to some of the previous parts as well. In terms of, you said the quantum field, that we can start engaging with it. I always have this question, why are we thinking as humans that we only have memories of the past? What about memories of the future? Why would that not be possible for us? And now I want to link it just in a different perspective, looking at it in terms of the collective intelligence that's available to all of us, but we are so conditioned just to look at the personal individual's perception and experience of knowledge and of wisdom and intelligence that we forget this quantum field of knowledge that's available, intelligence that's available to us through nature, through animals, through everything. And we just haven't learned how to tap into it. And slowly I see a shift that some people are starting to tap into it. We call it collective sense making. But I want to ask you about, or I actually want to just contribute to what you said about the younger generations, leaving this legacy and creating a different world for them together that they can thrive in. And also bring it back to that part where you spoke about enlightenment, of taking care of yourself, the sovereignty of the being. And now I also want to link it to your blockchain discussion, the Bitcoin discussion, where these technologies, it seems like they're opening up, just if you look at the economical cycle, how money is moving around. Maybe when we were children, when I was a child, there was no visibility of what was really going on there. Where now these technologies, from a young age, children get to look at the value of money differently when they get involved in technologies like these, because they are actively part of it. Is that because that's what I assume you're saying? And that's what I take from it, which would be wonderful, because it's directly then linked to what you said about taking care of yourself as well. Because money is just an energy. So whatever the technology is and the exchange method, which is all evolving all the time, especially now with these beautiful technology you're speaking about and that you have so much knowledge about. And I would really entice people to connect to you afterwards to find out more if they want to know more, if you are open to that. But it creates a new circle of life. And for us, we call it a circular economy. Because when you spoke of, I just want to take an example. Say, for instance, you now did with me a personal coaching session. So you're helping me to figure out my own life and to become whatever I can be, whatever name we have for it, whether it's potential catalyst, whether it's a mentor or coach, does not matter, or a teacher, does not matter. But what did you have to do to get all this knowledge that you have and the insights and the wisdom and the perception that you currently have to get to this point where you can guide me or assist me? But now, for instance, you maybe charge me 120 Canadian dollars, whatever it might be for the session. But that's no reflection of the chain behind you, who was all involved. And that's what we're trying to, with a lot of young people next year, through a physical experience across the globe, going to explore and experiment with. That we want to leave, that everyone who's involved in the process of our year journey is part of the circular economy in some way. And I don't know how that could link to technologies like blockchain. I don't myself know too little about it. I have to go and explore it myself as well. But it's just, when you speak about blockchain and Bitcoin, what I pick up, and I sense it in my body as well, I felt expansiveness. Whereas people, when they usually speak about money, especially from a poverty point of view or a lack point of view, my body usually would cringe in, it's like, It's not a nice feeling.
Mm.
They don't have enough. And it links back to that sovereignty of being, of taking care of yourself. So the younger, for me, that little ones can get involved in these new technologies and get to know about it and learn about it to empower themselves, the better. Because then their chance of thriving is so much better in the future than the little ones who's like living in a little glass house, who has no idea of what this financial economical circle is about, and then one day it hits them and they go out into the world with a big shock. And they don't know how to cope and how to thrive. And there's either this bond that you have to carry behind you like a big bag for 20 years or 30 years or whatever it might be. That's not a life.
Okay, so let's go back to the circular economy. I think one of the things, it's, when you get to my age, I think you think about, what do you regret? What would you change? And I think the most important thing that we can do for young people today is to really get them to understand money, where money comes from. And I'm not talking going to a bank and learning from a bank. I'm talking really finding people who are outside of the mainstream. And and this is maybe something that comes from my family, but I'm the sort of person, if everyone is following into one direction, this rebel in me always says, I get super suspicious. Like, it's like mindfulness that's now become this big trend. I wrote my master's degree paper on contemplative practices before it was fancy. Nowadays, it's a big trend. And when you look at what's happening out there, like, I'm very suspicious of it. I'm going, well, how is that being used? But that's another topic altogether. But I think the thing that we can all do for everyone, and if this is the one thing that we can do to educate everyone, not just Bitcoin, so let's take the technology away. How is money created? And I know there's this narrative the government just prints it. No, it's the whole way that banks created the fact that, you take your money, you give it to a bank, and that's not your money anymore. You don't have any control over it. That is what we need to understand. We need to understand the whole way that the economy works, as you described, the circular economy. We need to understand all those narratives and actually, I call it, hunt those assumptions down, everything that you think. And I think if, I had a debate with someone yesterday about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think we need to challenge all of these concepts and say, who created the concept? Maslow did not understand poverty. He comes from a wealthy family, and I'm just, with all respect, a person sitting feet up, drinking tea out of a porcelain cup, will have a very, has never really had suffering and lack in their lives. And how would they actually be able to truly understand what motivates human beings? How would they understand what it is if your family and, your kids are down in a coal mine working and dying, from all the toxins and things in there? They wouldn't. And so I really think if we can start, one of the questions I asked everyone I'm doing interviews with leaders in the industry, and I ask them this one question. If you had to teach artificial intelligence, if you were appointed a teacher for artificial intelligence, what would you teach? And it's interesting, the questions that are coming out, but there's like a theme coming out, and this is around this thing that you need to sort of question assumptions and not question authority. Look at who created a concept and where did they learn and whose ideas did they take, and sort of track that all down, but really investigate. Now, I know that people, I often get told by people, well, people are lazy, humans are lazy, they don't want to think. And I'm saying, no, I don't think that is true. I think, we just don't encourage that a lot. Like, kids ask these questions all the time. I never lost my sense of curiosity. So I think it's important to start with understanding money, starting to understand, because we need money in the world that we're in. You need financial security. But some people know more about it than others, and so it's great. I always say to people, it's wonderful. I watch people sit on stage and they sing rainbow songs while I'm out there and I'm busy working, rolling up my sleeve and getting going. And I think let's become super practical about things, and let's focus, like I always say, let me focus on one thing and I make a difference in this one thing, then that will help. So financial understanding of economies and questioning this GDP systems and just all of that, I think will make a huge change for people. Just get rid of the old narratives and write new stories. I always say, like, why do we have to accept the stories? Why can't I change up the stories? And I've started doing it. It's quite fun, isn't it? And I think you might enjoy that with the work that you're doing. Why does the Buddha story have to be that his wife, was the one who didn't know what was going on? Who says she was not the enlightened one and she sort of couldn't get through to him? Maybe she is the woman who brought him the honey and the milk, for him to get better. We can change up all of those stories. Those are all stories. Like, who said we have to accept the way they are? Turn them upside down. Like, Shrek. Shrek is a good example of how you turn stories upside down. Let's change the endings of the stories. Now, to come back to your idea about the future, there's no research that's coming out, and I think the book is called Persuasion. And I'll have to look it up, and then I can send you links to it. But we actually bring the future. Our memory is memories of the future, is what they're now discovering with neurosciences. So you're actually remembering the future, and that's then how you create goals, and that's then how you start creating milestones. So they're starting to, even in neurosciences, turn this whole thing upside down. So by storytelling, you can create new memories. So tell the kids new stories, tell them with good endings, tell them stories about, different ways of having money. I think that, and I know that's quite a long meander there, but I think I'm really passionate about this. I'm running actually a hackathon in Vancouver called Decentralized-Financial Wellbeing, with a challenge around folks who are just one crisis, just one health problem, whatever, away from financial distress. And they can't access these new economies. If you work 2 jobs, you don't have support for looking after the children, you're divorced, your partner is unable to support you. These are real people. This is what's really going on in the world. And we can have all these wonderful ideas, but if we don't find a way of truly helping and empowering people like that so that they can actually become able to access even these ideas, we're not going to be able to bring about any change. And I think that's how I see the potential and the work that I'm passionate about doing, and that I'm hoping and that I'm engaging with a lot of people, is to say, let's talk about prosperity. Let's teach everyone what prosperity means. And it's not just money, it's prosperity of the body, it's prosperity in your physical environment. I've written there's a poem that I did with a Doge comedy, talked about prosperity. So I think it's important for us to bring that out and start talking about it in a real way, and also not to talk about it in terms of bashing each other around politics and things like that. I think we are being distracted by all of those conversations, and it's up to folks like us to really sort of change the conversation and the narratives. And it can happen. I think we need 25% of a group of people, this research that came out now, then peers start changing. People will just automatically start changing their habits.
It's like
that was a long response.
No, that's wonderful. I love everything you say. And I so resonate with that. It's like the 100 monkeys principle, like one monkey starts jumping and then soon all the other monkeys jump as well.
Yeah.
But I'm also like you. I also have been the rebel, where I always asked, who decided? Who decided? And I was also out there to prove the opposite. And then I got to a stage where I realized I don't have to prove anything. I must just co-create with others the new, instead of fighting the old, which took me quite a long time to discover. But it was quite an interesting journey to stand on the sideline and looking in what's happening, especially in the consulting work, which I was part of for 2 decades, to look into what's happening there from the people, the clients, and also the consultants. So it was very interesting to see these interactions and to see why change leadership interventions never really worked, and those type of things, which fascinated me. But I was always asking also the opposite questions, of what's really going on here? what's happening on this beneath the surface that we can't see. And I think that's some of the empowering questions as younger generations for them to ask. And I know my daughter, she drove me nuts. She would not stop asking questions. And you speak about you were a chartered accountant. When she was studying, when she had accounting at work, at school, she would continuously ask me, who decided that must be this side and that must be that side? It was all these interesting questions that sometimes drove me up the tree. But I'm glad she did it. She's still very curious. She still does not take any prisoners because she wants to know why.
Yeah.
And why is there not another way of doing it, which is wonderful. But I think a lot of the younger ones, especially from our generations, were so conditioned. There was no independent thinking that was encouraged, but not even understood. It was not accommodated. So with your wonderful inspiration of sharing today, if I'm, say, 24 years old, what type of guidance or just triggering of catalyzing would you try to give me that I can be more sovereign, more empowered? And we're not talking about empowered as somebody give you an opportunity. It's from your own, from the inside out.
I think so. As I spoke again, I think understanding how the economy really works. So that means looking outside. So looking at things like regenerative economy, looking at things like syntropy. Everyone talks about entropy. No one knows about syntropy. Why? Because these things have been developed outside of Western traditional universities. Looking at agroforestry, going outside. There's wonderful work being done out of this. So that's important to look at. Go and visit where possible, and doing it with respect, where we still have indigenous communities who still live in terms of decentralized ways, and see that the narratives that have been created about survival of the fittest and this competitiveness is all wrong. It's not how the world works. That's really important. So, but see for yourself, go and find out these things for yourself. And then on the other hand, I don't think if you're a young person, you need to learn to code and understand code. There are so many free programs online where you can learn to code in C++. That makes a difference. Why? Because we live in a world now where people don't wait for permission. And I'm talking about the youngsters that I see here in North America. They're not waiting for anyone's permission to create new things because they can code. And so that is how these new technologies are happening. It's people are sitting down and say, why can't we, like you just said, your daughter does, but they code. So they actually go and code and create new things. And they create these huge networks with people. So it's very much about community. It's very much about working together. So that is really, really important. And I actually despair when I see young people actually refuse to engage with technology. I'm not saying you must be on your technology all the time, but I do think this empowers you quite a bit, because that means it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you will be able to find a way to look after yourself. You'll be able to find a way to earn income, to have a business. The days of having a job for life is like so over, and I always say to people, I've written quite a bit about that, and I'll start publishing this as well. I always believe that, the way that I look at my identity when I work, you have to work nowadays imagining that in 6 months you will not have a job. So this whole way of being has been turned upside down. And so there are ways that you can create and empower yourself to continuously be part of a new economy. And not fall for things like, oh, it's a gig economy and that's good for you. No, I don't think the gig economy is good at all. So again, I'm going back to understanding how the economies work, who's in charge, who's not, and then being able to code. And in particular, women, for some reason, and one of the things that I want to say to young women, And I think this comes from the background that you and I come from. You know, we've been told, you know, girls have to be nice and, you know, gentle and all of that. And so when you step sometimes in these environments with technology, it might be a bit of a shock to the system. They're often, you know, you walk into a space, just a bunch of young men coding, and they talk to each other in a very different way. And, you know, we've got names for them. Sometimes we call crypto bros or the Silicon Valley bros or whatever. And you just need to grit your teeth, grow a very thick skin, you know, forget about any of the ideas that you had about, you know, anything, and just enthusiastically participate. And not let that put you off in participating. I've driven a lot of and encouraged a lot of women in Vancouver to get involved in the space. And I was like, when I used to go to these events, I think I was sometimes the only woman there. We used to make a joke and say, when you go to these events, you know, it's the only type of conference that you go with. There's not a queue at the washroom for the ladies, you know, because they're like 3 of us, you know, out of 200-300 or something. That's changing now because of this. You know what, we are going to participate whether you want us there or not, whether you call us names or not, you know, whether you bully us online or not. So I think this ability to go like, you know what, I'll take it on the chin, and I'm not going to be put off by your language or by your bad manners or anything like that. And I'm just going to participate, and then that's how you're going to change things. So don't run away when it looks icky and you don't want to go there, and, you know, like, take all of those ideas just out of yourself, you know, and just see it as a different world and step in.
Yeah, you know what you're sharing now is so powerful, because it also links to how other generations treat you, the older generations. And I know with a lot of the young ones that I play with, that's also one of their biggest challenges. It's not only their peers in that type of scenarios and contexts, but it's also the older generations that don't believe they know anything. So they treat them like, they dismiss them very quickly. And the
So
same thing applies.
Yeah. So I want to change this up a bit. The other thing that's really important that no one is talking about is the fact that when we get older, that you, oh, well, you know, now I can't get any, you know, there's this idea, and it often comes across in North America, there's this millennial marketing thing that took hold, and people believe they're millennials, which has been debunked completely. But I was there when they created the marketing, so I know. But there's this idea of ageism. So the moment you reach a certain age, it's like the millennials will look at you, and literally companies will just say, sorry, you know, you're not part of the talent. And sort of literally they boot people out of companies. And so there's a lot of angst globally in terms of I'm getting older, and people do all sorts of things, even men, you know, facelifts and all sorts of stuff. And so I think to start shifting our minds, and again, go back, when I grew up, we were taught, and I always believed that my oma and my oma Khuriki and all of these, you know, grandmothers and all of that, I respected them a lot, and I really liked to be with them. You know, I liked to listen to them and trust them because they had all this experience. And I think it's important to bring back that culture. And indigenous cultures, that is still very much there. The older you get, the more people actually understand you've been there. You're still around. You got 5 decades, you're still here. That's quite an achievement. It means something in you made you survive. There's something that you can offer. So to start shifting that thinking around generations and go back into, you know, look at, you know, recognize where I come from, recognize where I could go. And if you get older, and I get approached by a lot of people who are getting older now, and suddenly they find they don't get work anymore, or, you know, they just, it's really a challenge for them. Yeah, that's not a challenge. You know, again, you reinvent yourself, create your career, create energy. Don't let young people with an attitude that you are useless put you off. Don't be put off by the fact that you can't find work out there because of your age, you know. Go and learn to code. Go and learn about these new technologies. And what I love about this space in particular with blockchain, and that is that a lot of people are getting very energized by it. I've met people who are like down in the dumps, and they don't feel there's any hope. And then they start attending meetups, and they start reading, and suddenly they're on fire because they can see this potential. And I think it's the same with artificial intelligence. It's you know, with the Internet of Things. most successful entrepreneurs are over 50, you know, like from 45 onward. So I think this is also important messages that we start talking about what it means to be human and the importance of experience and that respect, you know, for different stages in our lives and what that all brings.
And the different things we bring at those times.
Yeah,
We're not a commodity on a shelf with a sell by date.
yeah.
We,
But I know today I could not, it would have been totally impossible for me to know when I was in my 20s, in my 30s, like impossible. You know, so, you know, so I sometimes wake up and I go, oh, wow, you know, this is amazing. I'm so lucky. I woke up today and I'm alive. That's incredible, you know.
Oh, that's wonderful.
The other thing as well, quickly, is that what I've really appreciated about being in Canada is I've done a lot of leadership and organizational development work in places like Deloitte, the BC Liquor Distribution Board here, and a variety of other environments. And the folks here are incredibly open to new ways of doing it. So I've developed programs that are very much based on the principle that I learned in Africa, which is each one, teach one. And so I've created stuff that you don't need any technology to implement. It's all visual thinking, all very agile and all very self-empowering, no rules. It's a complete different way of doing things. And folks here really love it. They love the fact that we can sit down and have a really good conversation as a group of people or as individuals. So I don't even call it coaching anymore. I just call it really quality conversations because, you know, in the workplaces, people really don't have time for that. And so bringing the solutions focus, positive psychology, creative thinking, visual thinking all together, neurosciences. It's something, I don't know how it is in South Africa. I might be visiting South Africa, by the way. So I'll let you know if I come through and I might run some workshops there and happy to share some of these tools. But this is something that has been really quite remarkable. So yes, we've got all these new technologies happening, but inside business is also this openness with executives to say, you know, we're seeing the world is different and how can we actually start changing our leadership practices and the cultures to actually make workplaces more democratic, more inclusive, and more fair.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. You were such a bundle of wisdom and energy and enthusiasm and the rebel. I love that rebel coming out and showing her to us all as well. And I would really like to invite everybody who's going to engage in this video or the audio to reach out to you. You're a bundle of stuff. So reach out to her. She hails from a very good place. And she's got amazing experiences that we didn't even touch upon today because we have too little time for that. So please reach out to her. And thank you, Marie, for your inspiration and the questions you planted in our consciousness today and our awareness of just to ask lots of questions, stay curious, never stop being curious. There's always another possibility, and you can always reinvent yourself, and you always have another option. You have a choice.
Oh, yes.
You have a choice. So thank you so much, Marie, for
Thank
being
you very
with
much
us
for
today.
having me.
And we hope we can engage with you soon again in another way as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we will share all your wonderful stuff after the podcast with everybody as well, that they can reach out. You can share whatever information you want. And yes, have a wonderful day, everybody. And goodbye.
Bye.